Welcome to the Supported Living Property Podcast with your host, me, Lisa Brown, the place to learn about supported living property investing.
Hi, it's great to have you both here today. Thank you for joining me. For people who don't know you, Kristy, do you want to introduce yourself and tell people a bit about your background?
Yes, I'm Kristy. I started my life as a civil servant for many years, worked within the public sector, worked predominantly in finance in lots of different specialisms, and helped to found a company that used to link property investors to supported living services. Love that, but my heart actually lay in being on the ground. And last year, I made a massive decision to leave and join Sue and open up a provision where I'm on the ground helping people every day.
Fantastic. Sue, do you want to tell us a bit about you and your background?
So I'm Sue. My background is health and social care and counselling. Done it for a number of years, came away from it, set up a family business that ran for 12 years, still runs in the background, but then decided it was time to do something for myself and to use my knowledge and set up a provision under an RSL that's been running for 3.5 years, and then came together with Kristy to incorporate the CIC.
So tell us a bit about that. How did you guys start working together?
So,
who's going to answer that one? Go on then, Kristy.
I went a little bit silent. So in the company that I was in previously, Sue was actually one of the providers that we worked with, and Sue and I have become sisters. We are sisters. That's how we are. And just loved what Sue did, and basically we'd been having conversations for a little while, hadn't we? And I said that I wanted to be on the ground, and Sue was like, well, why don't we open up the CIC? Because of my background, because I worked in policy, I understood how things worked in kind of those specialisms, and therefore we just started out and went with it, didn't we, Sue?
We did indeed, yeah.
Learned a lot along the way, did a lot of research, and how to set our own rents, just incorporating things that I'd learned. So yeah, we just came together, and that's how we kind of met.
Now you're talking about CIC, but there'll be some people listening who aren't quite sure what a CIC is. So can you just explain what that is?
So it's a company interest. It's a charity interest company, which is a hybrid between a limited company and a charity. So you run it as a limited company, and it's overseen like a limited company, but it allows you to apply for grants, but you're not a full-blown registered charity. So it sits in between the two.
And it's used quite a lot, isn't it? There's quite a few different sort of supported housing organisations that uses the CIC as a delivery model, because it works quite well in this space, doesn't it? So I think it's something people are increasingly interested in and setting up, using that model. So tell me a little bit about the CIC. What is it that you do, and what is it that you set up to achieve?
So
I'm going to start naming you. I just don't want to put someone on the spot by saying you need to question.
Do that. So because there's already the limited company in the background, it was a case of opening up the CIC and then specialising in mental health. Predominantly, we aimed at men's mental health because we see that it's overseen and there's not that much out there. So I would say 90% of our tenants are mental health tenants, and it's about putting in the correct support, working with the correct external agencies. Our support that we do is tenant centred, and it's not just off a support plan. So although they might choose 7 different subjects on their support plan, it's actually, we work through it at their own pace, and we don't rush them through it, because we've got to build our relationship with that tenant. And some of them have been through support and care and not had no support in place, so they reveal themselves, they start letting their walls down, and then they're given a new support worker, or they're moved on to somewhere else, and there's never any consistency. So for us, it was always about being very consistent, having the same support worker consistently every week, and knowing that our tenants know that we're on call if ever they needed us. And that's how we really work. We deal with the little bits and pieces with support, which a lot of other providers don't do, which Kristy can go into a little bit about that.
Go on then, tell us about that, Kristy.
Yeah, so we like to be a little bit different. So although tenants are receiving support and we do talk them through about what we're going to do, they don't necessarily feel it's that way, if that makes sense. So a good example I can give is, it was Shrove Tuesday a few weeks ago. So I actually took an Aldi magazine, of all things, and we started to talk around budgeting, and I was showing them the difference between an Aldi shop and, say, a Tesco shop. And it got them thinking about where they go and spend their money. So that was the start of the session. As we went into the session, we actually got Googled all the ingredients to make pancakes online, brought them all together, and I supported them to cook. And therefore, you know, they're starting to develop those independent skills, but incorporating the budgeting in. So our sessions kind of get them really interactive and involved, but actually start to focus on things within their support plan. We have Reggie, who's our support dog. He's amazing, little dachshund, Reggie Chocolate Born. He's amazing.
So does he live in the property, or does he?
He lives with one of us, but he goes and attends 95% of support sessions, and that's because we've got tenants that actually won't leave the house. But since we've had Reggie, they will leave, and they will just, even if it's just a walk up the road, and you know, taking Reggie for a walk, it's getting them to try and break that cycle and pushing them a little bit every single time we take Reggie out. So we might only go up to the top of the road this week, but next week we may go round the block.
Yeah, and they absolutely love it. And we've done things like holistic gardening sessions. In the summer, we've arranged to go to a donkey sanctuary and incorporate support into that. And it's actually getting them out as well. They don't realise it, but it's actually encouraging them to leave the property, because a lot, like Sue said, a lot of them, due to mental health, don't feel like they can. So yeah, we do lots of different things, really. It's quite holistic, but it really, really works, and it gets them thinking and starts to help them focus on the elements that are going to empower them to go into move on. And even though move on is always in the end sight, it's not necessarily what we focus on at first, but we do keep them focused on the fact that at some point in time they will be going into move on, and they're bringing all these skills together to allow them to do that.
And so you've set this up fairly recently, haven't you? This is relatively new, this provision. Yeah. How many have you got? One property? How many properties have you got at the moment?
So we've got 2 that are live. We've just onboarded another, and we've got another 2 that are just going through final sign off. So we'll have 6 in total. Oh. And then we've got quite a few in the pipeline. But something that's really important to Sue and I is that we don't want to grow massively quickly. Everything has to be right, shaped and influenced correctly using our board, and therefore we're doing it at a much slower pace than maybe some other providers that we speak to are. But we just want to make sure we've got all the pieces in place every single time, just so that the support is there for the residents, because as we know, some support functions unfortunately do fail, and it's normally because they grow too quickly, and we don't want that, because we want to be around for a long time.
You mentioned having a board there as well. What does that consist of? Does that operate?
So we've shaped our board purposely in a certain way, and the board is all around helping us to grow as we go along, but keeping us safe. So we've got experts on there from different sectors. Our accountant even sits on the boards of different provisions as an advisor. He doesn't on ours, but he actually audits charities as well. So, you know, he keeps us right, us in the right direction. We'll give a little shout out to people. We've got Trish McGeer, Alistair Hoyne, we've got Bryn Walker, Tina Walsh. So there's a lot of people within the property and kind of finance sector on our board as well. We've also got a lot
of experience in that.
We're really lucky. Yeah, and we've got people that come from different backgrounds. We've got a lady that has built provisions in the past, so she's there, she helps us as and when we need them, an ex-police officer. We've got Sarah Burgess, who comes from like a childcare charity background. So yeah, we've got quite a few different people on the board, and we're very, very lucky that each of them has their own specialism that can shape our way forward. And obviously our resident that sits on the board as well, and they actually came to the last board meeting and explained the difference in their life that Sue has made, and she actually had the board in tears, Sue, didn't she? So you know, because it actually gives you a perspective about, you know, where that person from to where they've gone to, and it allowed the board to then put that into helping us to shape as we grow as well.
Yeah, it's really important, I think, isn't it? Particularly, like you said, there's a lot of poor practice in this sector, and there's been a lot of concern. We've seen organisations going bust recently, haven't we, that have grown very fast. And yeah, I think it makes sense to make sure you've got all of that support around you and that expertise. So the properties that you actually take on, what kind of properties are you using? What do your properties look like? How do they feel?
So all of our properties are homely. They all feel like a home. We've got 2 6-bed properties. We've got a 5-bed. We've got another 5-bed, and we're just in the process of, it's coming to the end of the build, isn't it? The end of the refurb, 4 1-bedroom flats, self-contained, which have been specifically designed for a person with a disability. So we've got those 4, and then, like I said, they're all house shares. Some of our properties have got en suites. They've all gone back to brick and been completely refurbed.
So we're talking about really high quality properties that are really nicely refurbished.
Yeah, because we just believe that if we wouldn't ourselves live in it, why would we put a tenant into it? Because they're a person and not a product. And it's about making an impact and getting them to move on in life, and, you know, breaking the cycle. If you put somebody into a property that is in a really rundown area, the property's not very nice, and the tenant type isn't very nice, and they just mix and match just to fill a room, it's not going to work. You can't put somebody who's 18 with a mental health issue in the property with somebody who's 50 and been in and out of prison and who is an ex-drug addict. It won't work. So for us, it's always about making sure we put the correct tenant into the correct property within the age range of that particular property.
And I think there's several issues in there, aren't there, to talk about? I think, you know, from the property perspective, so it's interesting. So they're not all ensuite properties. You have a mixture of some ensuites and some not ensuites. And do you have staff that are like a staff space within those properties, or you don't? No.
We don't know.
No,
but
because of the support we provide. But we're on 24-hour call. So they've always got somebody they can call. But yeah, no, because I know you've done quite a few kind of sessions now, but things like having that you have to declare it, we tend to declare it in our lease if we were to have an office or staff space there, because it can affect lending. No, we don't, because we don't need it at the moment, but maybe in the future. But yeah, that's kind of the support that we do.
Yeah, no, that makes, and the amount of support that your tenants would have typically would be how many hours a week?
It varies. So the minimum is 1 hour, the maximum is 3 hours, but they can get more.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And, I'm so sorry.
No, it's fine. It's all right.
It's a tenant coming to the car.
It's all right. It's fine. We should just explain that Sue's popped out of a support session to come and talk to us today, so she's probably being called away to help someone. And then you're also talking about tenant sort of matching, if you like, within each property. And that's really important. And I think that's something that some organisations don't put a lot of care and attention to. How do you arrange that?
So
when
it's
they go through an assessment, but it's also when we take a tenant on. So you may see quite frequently that there are lots of providers that will advertise their rooms on Facebook, on Gumtree. We don't do that. We will not do it, and we've never done it. We have built up a referral system, and we also work alongside Room Match. And all of our referrals come via a CPN, a discharge nurse, local doctors, the police, YPAs. So before we've even interviewed them, and before we've even done an assessment with them, they already come with a risk assessment, and they've already gone through
a initial assessment with who's making the referral over to us. So we've got a paper trail of everything, and then if we can accommodate that person, because we know how our properties are set up, we will then bring them in for one of our own initial assessments and have a chat with them. Then from there we would take them to the property to have a viewing. If they like it, we will then go on to doing the third part, which is the initial sign off. And then once they've settled in within the first week, because we believe that with what they've already gone through when they've hit the third section, and they've been put into the property, that it's all very, very overwhelming. So then in the next session, we then will go through a support plan with them. So we've got an idea about what they would like support with, but we start finalising everything on how we're going to deliver their support, what works best for them, what areas of support they actually need.
And that sounds like it's really considered and carefully done, because obviously that, you know, that can make or break support for people, can't it, if they're in the wrong place? Yeah, makes a massive difference. And the people living in your properties, do you issue them with tenancy arrangements or with licenses, or how does that work? Kristy, do you want to take that one?
Ours are on licenses, so just because of the way it's set up, because it safeguards them as well, because if they did need to be moved quite quickly for any reason at all, they're able to, and we're able to move them as well. So yeah, we keep them on licenses, and we have a 2-hour window where we can move them if we needed to, but most, if they did need to be moved for any reason, we normally give them 7 days just to, and we also help. So we don't just go, right, you've got 7-day notice, you're off. We will help place them in the next place if they need to be moved for any reason. So, and we're well known for that, aren't we? So really, we don't, you know, and some of our residents that have moved on for whatever reason, some to move on, some just because they needed some to be nearer to closer family connections, they still ring us and keep us updated, and we love that. Let us know how they're getting on. So yeah, it's amazing.
That's nice. And then you talk about move on. Where typically do your tenants move on to?
Some going to, so Sue's developed, because Sue's based in Birmingham, she's got a really good relationship with letting and estate agents within the area. So she, and also developers, so she'll talk to people in the private rented sector about them moving into that type of accommodation. We do work with Birmingham City Council. We get them registered on the site so they can start to bid for properties. As we know, there's not a lot of stock, but you know, we do help them to do that, and we do that if they're into the move on section of support, they'll be doing that every week with us, as well as doing it in the interim as well. And Midland Heart's the other one that we tend to focus on as well, isn't it? So we'll help them to find accommodation on there and bid for properties on there as well.
And we also work with some landlords that have got their own working professional HMOs, and we will, if we've not got room in, we've got a step down house that we use. So when we've got a tenant that comes to the end of support and there is nothing else we can do, we will move them into a step down house that we've got, which is just a 3-bedroomed normal family home. We continue to support them once a month, but because there is nowhere for them to go, it then becomes a cycle which we're trying to break. So if we say to them, look, we're at the end of your support, there is nothing else we can do, they're going to go into another supported housing accommodation. Whereas if we move them into our own step down property, we're still overseeing everything with them and still continuing to support them once a month. We don't get exempt rents for that. We get LHA rates. But they're at that point where they're independent, and it might be just they've had a temporary job that's only been for 3 months, and then it's about helping them get into permanent work. And we work alongside DWP whilst we're doing this as well, don't we, Kristy?
Yeah, DWP have been amazing, kind of helping us to because we'd like to do more step down. That's something we'd like to go into, have more step down facilities, and just kind of and grow from there as well, so we can help them, and like Sue says, catch them when they fall, and if we need to bring them back in, we can. But they always know they've got that support there, and like I say, some that have left us still message us for advice, and we would never, you know, we're always there for them no matter what they need.
And that obviously sets you apart, that sort of step down and that ongoing support, because that's what not many organisations are offering that, are they? So that's something that does definitely, and I think people listening.
It's maybe because, they don't understand how it works, and people see working in supported housing as just delivering the support. But what happens when you come to the end of their support plan? Where do you place them? And a lot of people think that they can only work 15 hours or 16 hours because it affects their benefits. But when you start delving deeper, if you understand the benefit system, you're telling your tenants, go and get a job. We can help you this side, and there is other things that can be put into place, because your tenant thinks, I'm going to be paying £600 a month for shared accommodation, but then when you look at the bigger picture of it, there are other benefits that they are still entitled to, even as a single person. So they may be entitled to a top up of housing benefit, they may be entitled to work universal credits, the work element of it, but because it's never been explained to them in any other provision that they've been under, they're like, oh, we've always been told that we can't work, or if we do work, we can only work 15 hours. So they get stuck in that cycle, and it's about literally breaking that cycle for them.
Amazing.
And having somewhere for them to go after, hence why we work with local landlords that understand what we do.
And for people who are listening to this, thinking, I guess the next question is, what's the future for you guys? Where do you see, you were talking about, you've got lots of exciting plans. You were talking about potentially some more step down stuff. Where do you see your organisation going?
Go on,
so we've just gone into another council. So we're not just working in Birmingham Council, we're working in Kidderminster. For us, it's about growing organically and not running before we can walk. So although there's 4 years experience as being a provider and 12 months as a CIC standalone service with the council, it's about just going slowly, and if it's meant to happen, it's meant to happen. If it's not, it's not. It's not about pushing ourselves to become absolutely massive so we're recognised all over the place, because what we do, it needs to be done correctly.
And for people who are listening thinking, oh, this sounds really interesting, I get contacted all the time by people who want to set up as care and support providers. What advice would you have for people who are looking at coming into this space to deliver support?
For me, be prepared for the highs and the lows. You're going to have a lot of them. And learn. So for me, one of my biggest things was getting attached to residents, I suppose, is the only way to say it, isn't it, Sue? And sometimes it's learning and teaching yourself to be impartial, because that's how you have to be as well, and not to be too soft. I was very soft at the beginning, wasn't I, Sue? And sometimes that isn't you need to kind of get them focused. So I think for me, it's about that impartiality, but helping them to grow and empowering them to move on, and just be prepared for that. There are gonna be emotional days, and what we have actually brought in now as well, where because we want to be the best, we have supervision incorporated into the setting. So we have somebody who comes in who's impartial, who watches what we do, and is there to support us as well as support workers, just to make sure that we're okay.
Yeah.
And that's something that helps, I think. So having that supervision element, I think, is absolutely amazing, because it's somebody coming in, a third party, who's asking, are you okay? Is there anything that you need? So for me, that really helped us to kind of shape and grow as well, didn't it? So in things that we weren't necessarily thinking, it's kind of helped us to shape things very differently as well, where we might not have been doing it 100% correctly, but now we are, because they've helped us to incorporate that. So definitely supervision's a good one to bring into your setting.
I think particularly there's a lot of sort of single nurses, social workers setting up services by themselves. You two have got each other as well, which obviously is great as well, but to bring in supervision is really important. There'd be, you'd have that in a clinical setting. So
and we've also we have an auditor that comes in and audits everything, because I feel like you need that. When you're really, really close to the work that you do, you're not necessarily always going to 100% spot something. So we have somebody that comes in and spot checks our files and everything and make sure we're doing everything correctly, and I think that really helps as well.
That's great, thank you. Sue, is there anything else you'd add to that? Anything else you think for people who are listening, you think?
Don't think it's easy, and don't think it's a walk in the park, because you will spend nights and nights and nights awake. You'll shed tears, like literally blood, sweat and tears 4 years down the line. And even last week I was like, I can't do this no more. What am I going to do? Just because it was just one of those weeks. And you know, there's 100 bed spaces between the limited company and the CIC. Our team is very, very good, but you still have your bad days along with your good days, and you get more good days than you do bad. But it's the team that you build around you. And I still actively work week in and week out in the provisions. So I think it depends on, are you looking at this as purely just business, or are you looking at it as business but wanting to make a change in people's lives? And that's where you can become attached, because if you were just solely business minded, everything would be staffed out and you would be delegating everything. But when it's your own and you've grown it from the ground upwards, it's very hard to let go. And like I said, it's the support network that you have around you. If you're going to sit under an RSL, your support network's not that great. If you're standalone and you're a CIC, the support we have, and that's because we've built our board the way we have, is absolutely fantastic.
That's fantastic. Thank you both for sharing so much about your experiences. It's been really, really valuable to hear all about it, and wish you all the best with your future plans. Excited to see where this goes. Thank you both. Take care.
Thank
Bye.
you, Lisa.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.